chug, 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 chug,
Welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host, Guy.
And I'm Blake.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when you're talking about children's card games. It's been about a week since the most recent announcement for our format, Commander, but we have 2 new banned cards and 1 unbanned card. We have Paradox Engine, banned, Iona, Shield of Emeria, banned, and Painter Servant is unbanned. So tonight we are going to be talking about our thoughts and feelings on these cards. It is important to make clear that we are expressing our opinions and want to do so in a positive and healthy manner with some swearing, since there has been a lot of recent negativity around this announcement. So we will be discussing our thoughts on each of the cards that were banned and unbanned, as well as a broad discussion on the banning in our second half of the episode. It is also important to make clear that people who make death threats over bannings of cards, that is not okay. That is something that's come up and something that should not be tolerated in the community. In the end, this is a children's card game and is meant for fun. No one's life should be at risk over this.
Not at all.
No. So before we get into our discussion though, Blake, what are we drinking?
Oh yes, thank you. So we drink every episode, and this episode I am drinking Tomakin Highland Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. And it's the cheapest 12-year aged I could find.
Very nice. I'm finishing off my bottle of Prophecy, which we were drinking during the Core Set 2020 episode. Oh, by the way, I need to mention this really quick, but in the Core 2020 episode, I mentioned send us an email. We want to hear from you guys. I feel super dumb because I realized that I have been putting the wrong email address in our descriptions for every episode. So please check the new description.
Shame.
Shut up.
Shame.
Shut up. Please check the new description. It should be updated. And we would love to hear from you guys.
Constant improvement. There we go.
All right.
So now that that's been said, we're going to talk about the philosophy document that the Rules Committee and the Commander Advisory Group have made. These are the people that are in charge of the EDH ban list. And so this is kind of their philosophy document, their idea of like what the format should be and how it should operate. Just so everyone's on like the same page. No single rule can establish criteria for a ban. There are many mitigating and exacerbating factors. Some cards will represent an extreme or a single on a single axis. Others are a confluence of multiple smaller issues. The following list isn't exhaustive, nor is it a checklist, but it represents ways in which cards challenge the positive experiences players look for in the Commander games. It includes cards which easily or excessively cause severe resource imbalances, allow players to win out of nowhere, prevent players from contributing to the game in a meaningful way, cause other players to feel they must play certain cards even though they are also problematic, are very difficult for other players to interact with, especially if doing so requires dedicated, narrow responses when deck building, interact poorly with the multiplayer nature of the format or the specific rules of Commander, or lead to repetitive gameplay. I want to make clear the idea that the ban list in EDH is not about balancing the power level of cards. That is like what traditional formats like Standard, Modern, and Legacy are governed by. Sheldon has explicitly stated that Commander is a format that can have powerful cards. Like, just imagine the ban list if every card people deemed too powerful or super busted got banned. Is that a format people would actively want to play? I don't think so, and I don't think you think so either. So moving forward, we're going to assume all of this criteria is not problematic whatsoever and just take it as it is. And we're going to move on and talk about these banned cards.
All right, thank you, Blake. So first we're going to talk about Painter Servant, which is the card that was unbanned this announcement. And so the official reasoning for why Painter Servant was taken off the ban list was Painter Servant is a card that has been discussed for a long time and it's time to take off the shackles. We feel as though there are now more weird and fun uses for the card than there are dangerous ones. The card will provide deck builders with some additional paths to explore in expressing their creativity. This will lead to wild interactions and epic plays. So, if you listen to our ban list episodes that we had towards the beginning of our podcast, Blake mentioned that he thought Painter Servant should be taken off the unbanned list. But I was like, no. There's so many other combos than just Painter Servant and Grindstone, and Painter Servant and like Iona Shield of Emeria, where Painter Servant deems to be still ban-worthy. Now that Iona has been taken off, the rules committee deems that Painter Servant might be now playable. There's still the combos like Painter Servant and Ugin the Spirit Dragon, where you could destroy everyone's lands. There's Painter Servant and Grindstone, Painter Servant and Pyroblast, Painter Servant and Combost, Painter Servant Washout, Painter Servant All Is Dust, and the Painter Servant and Lawin Cephalid Impress. All these are new combos that you can now run with Painter Servant that make it a little more dangerous to play just because of, Painter Servant being able to make all cards one specific color. So, upsides to it being taken off the ban list, it could probably lead to some wacky interactions rather than more degenerative ones in the coming months. So I do look forward to see what comes out of this. Though the downside, or maybe this might be an upside, is that this card spiked really quickly.
Yeah.
And now one copy is $40 and foils are close to over $100. So
yeah.
It now isn't going to be a card that's easily accessible to everyone, but the people who had it, have it and now can make use of it.
Yeah, there's not too much you can really do about that. Whenever a card is unbanned, it always spikes in price. It's what happens every time. So a lot of the discussion around this card, I'll hear, on its own, it does nothing. And that's actually kind of true. It's like a 2 CMC artifact that has such a weird effect, it kind of does nothing on its own. But then we move on to the discussion of, okay, well, and I think it's part of what you're bringing up, Guy. It's, it has all these 2-card combos that, it's a 2-card combo that wins you the game, or pretty much wins you the game, or locks people out. And then you kind of get into the other topic of, you can't ban a card for being part of a 2-card combo, otherwise the ban list would be huge. It would just be such a huge list, and that's just not practical. So I know, Guy, I was originally this can come off the ban list, and you told me all the 2-card combos. I'm like, no, it should stay on. But I've reverted back to my original statement of, no, this can come off the ban list. It's fine. Honestly, it's okay. You can't ban every 2-card combo, and so there's other cards on the list that could also come off under that reasoning too. Honestly, both this and Iona could have stayed because that's a 2-card combo. Yeah.
Yeah, but now that Iona's on the ban list, this card can definitely come off just because the interaction between Iona and Painter Servant actively locks out every single other player.
Every single opponent. Yeah. I understand that, but again, you can't ban every 2-card combo. So it's very much a trade. I'm certain the rules committee and everyone has realized that Iona and Painter Servant basically switched places. That's really what happened.
So on the topic of Iona, let's kind of talk about her for a moment, since she was one of the cards that was banned. So Iona, Shield of Emeria. The reason why she was put onto the ban list was she creates a negative experience for many players without the benefit of a positive application. This has been previously considered. We had previously considered its high mana cost sufficient to keep it from getting played, but deeper investigation demonstrated many ways of getting it onto the battlefield without paying that cost. Iona's Shield of Emeria is also an exemplar as the type of card which creates an experience we wish to discourage, namely shutting players out of games. So this has definitely been a card that's been talked about forever, and this is
a long time.
Normally one of, like, if you ask people like, oh, if you were to name 3 cards to be put on the ban list, this card would probably be one of the top cards that people would say, like, actively say, like, we want to see this banned. So her ability is considered one of the most hated because it locks out a monocolor deck specifically and can just possibly ruin someone's win condition. Personally, I'm indifferent because this card being banned, I did play with her for a short time, though I ran her in my angel deck just because she is a very powerful angel. And so, I realized with Painter Servant as well, we didn't even talk about what these cards do. So Iona Shield of Emeria is 6 white legendary creature. When you cast Iona Shield of Emeria, choose a color. While Iona Shield of Emeria is on the battlefield, players can't cast spells of the chosen color, and she's a 7/7 with flying. Yeah. So if you are playing and you play her, you can actively lock out a monocolored deck by naming that color. So if you say green and someone at the table has a mono green deck, guess what? That mono green deck can't do anything. Painter Servant, which is a 2 generic artifact creature scarecrow, as it comes into the battlefield, choose a color. All cards are that color while Painter Servant is on the field. So if you were to say Painter Servant and then you name blue, then you cast Iona and name blue, that means that all cards in every other player's decks are blue and they can't play those cards. So
yeah, basically.
Yeah. So saying that Iona and Painter Servant switch places is a good thing because, if Painter Servant became unbanned but Iona wasn't, then you do have a combo that can just lock out people. Okay. Anyway, I just realized that. So yeah, personally, I'm indifferent because she's a very powerful angel and I was running her in my angel deck, but her high mana cost is definitely something that swayed me from, playing with her, and so I eventually took her out. Now, there are decks like the Old Kalia and Yannette that can easily cheat her out, which gets around that 9 mana cost.
Yeah.
So
because it's when she enters the battlefield, it's not a cast trigger. It's when she enters the battlefield, so it can be reanimated and basically cheat the cost.
I mean, yeah, for sure. You can get her out turn 2 if she's in your hand, discard her, and then reanimate her or do something. So, very powerful and easy to, cheat out. So, upside to her being banned is that, we don't have to, fear that, like monocolor, like with all my monocolor decks, like that is something, you know, that I have to worry about is if someone does play Iona and chooses the color that I'm playing, well then I can't play the game. Decks like Talia and Yanette, they have one less powerful card that they have to cast. Now the downside to me personally is, even though she does lock out monocolor decks, I kind of thought that like if she's on the battlefield, it kind of encourages table talk where, you know, players have to actively work together to get rid of her, whereas it's almost like creating kind of like a community or like, you know, problem solving together to take out Iona, which in spirit is what EDH is about, is like interactions between other people. But this card probably caused more problems than it did solutions for that specific reason. So personally, you know,
you're about 50-50.
I'm about 50-50. I'm about 50-50 with all these cards, to be honest, though.
Okay. I'm kind of also like neutral on this. Iona directly violates the whole criteria of prevent players from contributing to the game in a meaningful way. The thing is, like, competitives don't even play this card because even cheating her out is too much work and non-synergistic with most decks, and casuals rarely run this in their deck. Like, casuals are good at self-policing themselves because it leads to the feel bads. So you almost never saw this. You even took it out of your deck.
Right. Once I made my Avacyn deck a little more competitive and, you know, at a much higher power level, I felt like Iona was probably not something that I needed, just because I wanted to win quicker through either mass land destruction or mass creature destruction, rather than, you know, trying to get out this huge mana cost angel that would just, you know, kind of like slow the game down. I wanted to try and win faster.
Yeah, so honestly, she wasn't even really played that much, so I feel like her banning, people won't notice her absence that much. I mean, there's like people like myself who like had to take her out of some decks, but you know, it's I don't know. It kind of feels bad not to be able to play with a card. Also,
what deck were you running her in?
I had her in my Gisela Angel Tribal Boros deck. Yeah.
How many times would you say you casted her?
I'd say I only casted her. I've had the deck for about a year, play about once a week, and I've only cast her like 5 times, and it would usually just try to be like a way for me to like try and stop someone from playing half their spells as I tried to hit them with angels. Usually it didn't work, but
what color would you typically choose, would you say? Or
it would usually be like black or blue, like because black would board wipe and blue would mass bounce.
Okay, yeah, that's, I think for me, I probably also had her in my deck for a year. I think I only got to play her 2 or 3 times, and I think it depended on the situation, but I think for the most part I chose blue because just scared of Cyclonic Rift or something. Okay, now we're going to move on to our final banned card.
Well, do you want to talk about the rest of your notes?
Wait, what else do I have to say?
Look at your notes.
I am. Where are you? I talked about the upsides and the downsides.
Yeah.
And then what else? Oh, wait. Okay, I see. So, okay, this banning makes more sense to me than the Paradox engine, just because her ability is definitely not in the spirit of the EDH. So definitely more neutral, and she directly violates the prevent players from contributing to the game in a meaningful way. So I was trying to have a conversation with someone the other day about yes, Iona should be banned, Void Winnower should not be, but they were just not having it because they were like, oh, Void Winnower is like, it just causes you to not play half your spells. And I was like, well, actually, we had a discussion just not too long ago.
Not that many episodes ago.
Yeah, where we were like, oh, you just need actually like a majority of the cards that are like single target removal are odd even cards. So you could get rid of Void Winnower pretty easily. And they were like, oh, but I just don't happen to run those. And I was like, that's your fault. That's not like the card's fault. That's just you not building your deck right.
You're just not including those cards that can get rid of Void Winnower.
Then, because they were like, oh, I want to do like a mass board effect. Well, why would you want to do that when you just want to get rid of Void Winnower? So, and then I also listened to Sheldon's podcast about these recent bannings. And part of the reason, too, is because Iona is just seen as a pure hate card where there's just no fun way to play her. And I'm like indirectly quoting him right now. Mm-hmm. Whereas Painter Servant, can create quote unquote fun combo shenanigans that EDH is supposed to be all about.
Yeah, and my counter argument to that is fun is subjective. Like, who are you to say that I can't have fun casting Iona? I can have fun casting Iona, and I did. You don't really get to decide what I consider fun and is not fun. Right. Fun is subjective.
For sure.
All right. So let's move on to the meat of this episode. At least for me.
All right. So Paradox Engine. The reason why Paradox Engine was banned. Oh my god. I was just about to do it again. All right. Paradox Engine is a 5 CMC artifact. 5 CMC legendary artifact, that says whenever you cast a spell, untap all non-land permanents. So the reason why Paradox Engine was banned was it is a card that has proven to be intensely problematic. Not only does it provide easy wins seemingly out of nowhere, it has demonstrated the potential to unintentionally wreck games. Easily inserted into any deck, it combines with cards which players already have heavy incentives to play, generating a great deal of mana with virtually no deck building costs. While we don't ban cards which are only problematic, if you build around them, Paradox Engine has clearly demonstrated that it doesn't need to be built around to be broken. So Blake, you have quite a bit to say about this.
Yes, so I do have a lot to say about this. I will try and be as concise and as focused as possible. So, I do not believe this card should have been banned. I don't believe this card should stay banned. So, here we go. It provides wins seemingly out of nowhere. That's more of a reflection of players not knowing what to expect when they look at a board of like 8 mana rocks worth of stuff, and they don't think, Paradox Engine is a win condition. That's kind of the player's problem, not a card problem. Easily inserts into any deck. This is one of the main arguments for banning this card that I hear, and no, it does not. It does not go in every deck. Unless a deck has mana dorks or low CMC rocks, this probably shouldn't be in a deck. Notice I said shouldn't. It can go in competitive decks and casual decks that synergize with it, but there are also decks on both sides that should not be running it. When people say someone takes a 15-minute turn after casting it, it's usually in a deck that shouldn't have it in the deck because the synergy just isn't there and it doesn't smoothly get them to the win. That's a deck building problem, not a card problem. So, a list of competitive and casual commanders that don't want Paradox Engine that I thought of in 1 minute was Najeela, Selvala, Heart of the Wilds, The First Sliver, Godo, Gitrog. Then you have the more casual of like Sigarda, Tatiova, Nikia of the Old Ways, Omnath, Locus of Rage, Gisela, the Ur-Dragon, Edgar Markov. This is like a list I thought of in like 1 minute, and I can go on and on. This does not go in every deck. This does not make every deck better. There are decks that actively do not want Paradox Engine because it does not synergize with a deck. There's also the argument of generating a great deal of mana with virtually no deck building cost. Paradox Engine produces no mana by itself, so the idea that it produces too much mana too quickly doesn't really hold up. It synergizes most with Mana Dorks and Low CMC Rocks, which do produce the mana, but again, not all decks are running these cards. Paradox Engine does exactly nothing the second resolves, so it couldn't really fit into the winning the game upon resolution exactly, and it also doesn't reset the game like a lot of other banned cards are on the list for. Also, Paradox Engine does nothing to take the ability to play the game away from other players, so that just doesn't fit that criteria at all either. I think actually looking at the card itself matters. So like Guy, you described it, it's a 5 mana artifact. It's incredibly difficult to cheat into play. It can't be reanimated by typical reanimation. It can be countered. So first you have to pay 5 mana up front just to put it on the stack, then it has to resolve, then you have to cast a spell in order to create the untap trigger. This trigger can be responded to. This trigger needs to have non-land permanents to untap with. Then you need to have something to benefit from the untap. There are so many steps and so many ways to interact with this card and stop it. Why do all these things matter though? Well, it shows that in every instance you have a chance to respond. When it's on the stack, you can counter it. Then when it's on the stack, you can remove the non-land permanent that best benefits from being untapped. It requires you to have a castable spell after it resolves. It requires you to have mana to cast the castable spell if it resolves. The casting of that spell creates a trigger to which Paradox Engine can be responded to, yada yada yada. It's just, okay, so in summation, taking a quick sip of my drink here. Here we go.
It gets Blake feeling all different kinds of ways.
Yeah, so just again, to summarize, it produces no mana by itself, so it can't produce too much mana too quickly. It does not win the game upon resolution or reset the game in the form of wiping hands, life totals, or boards. It does not take the ability away for anyone to play the game. It can go in any deck, but it shouldn't. It's not a legendary creature, so it's not really abused like Gristlebrand or other cards like such. It's a 5 mana artifact, which means cheating into play is difficult and can be countered.
The one, I know that you brought this up, and then I was like, what about Arkham decks? Isn't that the first thing you would want to grab? You know?
Yeah, and that's literally the one and only example of a deck cheating Paradox Engine into play, out of the like dozen or two others. So yes, there's like a lot of things in life, there's usually like 1 or 2 exceptions to a rule, and that's Arkham. So I will give you that. Anyway, it does require you to cast another spell in order to untap, whereas like Seedborn Muse or Prophet of Krufix doesn't. The untap can be responded to. Paradox Engine isn't hexproof or indestructible or anything like that. It only untaps non-land permanents. It's never part A of a 2-card combo, it's always part B, and it does nothing by itself besides be a 5 mana artifact. So throughout that whole spiel I just gave, I'm sorry if it was very wordy, I did my best to try to avoid the word fun, because again, fun is subjective. There are so many cards that have been legal since the inception of the format that many people call unfun. Armageddon isn't fun, Winter Orb isn't fun, Time Stretch isn't fun, Warp World isn't fun. Nobody can say that. All playstyles are valid. You don't necessarily have to want to play against them, but you can't be like, you shouldn't play that. You're a bad person for playing that. You can't do that. You just can't. Like, there just isn't a way to prove that a total amount of net fun, if that's even a thing, would be greater for all the people wanting it banned compared to people like me who love the card and are now having less fun because they can no longer play it. So like I just listed all the criteria of Paradox Engine, and it's kind of concerning because since the rules committee doesn't truly follow their own criteria, I just explained how the criteria they gave doesn't actually work with Paradox Engine. It kind of makes me lose credibility of the rules committee, loses credibility in my mind as an authority to make these types of decisions. They just do.
Yeah, I know you have a lot more stronger feelings for this card to not be banned than I do. But I don't know. I've been like wishy-washy about whether or not I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it should be banned. Oh, but, maybe not. And, your arguments have definitely made me think more of oh, maybe not. I wouldn't say I'm 100% convinced that it shouldn't be unbanned, but I'm more maybe like on the 80% now, maybe 70%.
Oh, well, that much? Okay.
70%, take it back off. Whereas, but part of me is like, okay, what if we just put it on the ban list for now, see what happens, and, maybe it proves that it wasn't actually that problematic.
I will admit, it is one of the most powerful cards in the format. I don't deny that. I rightly acknowledge that. But I don't think it fits any of the criteria of other that should ban a card. I don't think it fits that criteria. I don't think it should be on the ban list. And a lot of people agree with me. Yeah,
but it does bring down the power level of some of the more powerful decks at the moment. So it does kind of, not necessarily even the playing field, but it might give some other decks a chance to shine now.
Here's my question. I have a question for you.
Oh,
does that matter? Does it matter lowering the power level of some stronger decks? Why should it?
Unless if it was just like, in the casual setting, it shouldn't, because unless if there's something that's on the line, then it really does just become about like who could afford to play like the most powerful cards. So maybe not in the casual setting, which is what most of EDH is meant to be, but maybe in more the competitive side, it would matter, but I don't know.
Okay, I guess that kind of, that's like kind of a different discussion where like people kind of say the phrase spirit of the format, but like that, it sort of seems like whenever people say that, they just mean playing casual is the best way to play and the only way you should play, and if you want to play more competitively, you're wrong for doing so. That's usually been my experience.
Now I have a question for you, Blake.
Yeah.
What are you going to run instead of Paradox Engine now?
Gosh, I actually don't know. I haven't figured out what I'm going to replace. Not Painter Servant. I'm not going to put in Painter Servant, actually.
Yes, I did. That was my specific example is, are you going to run Painter Servant over Paradox Engine now because Painter Servant works so well in Una? Or...
Okay, here's the thing.
It doesn't work so well, but kind of.
So, kind of going off on a tangent here, like for Una decks, Painter Servant is only actually good in casual to like mid-casual, like very casual to mid-casual builds where you have a bunch of like random 2-card combos. It's kind of reminiscent of Pilla, where it's also a 2 CMC artifact creature scarecrow with a really, really weird ability. Pilla only combos with one other card, Grand Architect, but Painter Servant combos with a bunch of other cards. But like the thing is, both of these combo pieces are really like specific and narrow and don't synergize with the deck as a whole. So once you kind of get to like the more competitive build of Una, it just doesn't synergize well enough, and you want better cards.
Okay. I mean, fair enough. Mm-hmm. I took out Paradox Engine and just put in an island.
All right.
But that's also because...
Island OP, please ban.
Well, that's also because I'm making Chase a little less competitive because I'm trying to put all my resources into making my true CEDH Gitrog deck. So I'm taking out like Grim Monolith I took out like some of the moxes that I'm gonna put into Gitrog. So this gives Jace a little more like freedom to do like some jankier things, or not jankier, but fun things. Like I'll probably put back in Expropriate once I figure out just like, you know, mana base and everything. But now that there's no need to run Paradox Engine and try to like combo off on like turn 4 or 5, that can be a little more fun.
Guy, haven't I told you anything fun is subjective?
In my definition, for me.
That is true. You're right. You used my own logic against me. Very good.
Yeah. So fuck you.
All right. Why don't we move on to the like later half of this episode?
Yeah. So, what would we have done differently? Is there a card we would have rather have seen banned, Blake?
I guess I don't really know how to answer this question because it's not really the question I want to answer, because it's the issue is not like more bannings, it's more communication. And by that I mean players should sit down to a table, start a game by saying, what power level do we all want to play at? And once everybody's agreed to that power level, you play the game, everyone's like playing and having fun, and like there's no feel bads, and then everyone's happy when the game ends. So the casuals who hate seeing these powerful cards that are like ban worthy or on the ban list will never have to see them in most likelihood if they have that conversation at the beginning of the game. And the competitives who want to play with these powerful cards will happily get to. And it's basically a win-win scenario where everyone gets to play against like-minded people, and there doesn't have to be this conflict. So the question you asked me was like, what would we have wanted differently? Like in the context of like, what would we want to have banned or unbanned? There's a lot of cards that can be unbanned. And I think most players agree that there are a lot of cards that can be unbanned. But before that happens, we as players need to better communicate. We need to have that conversation. What power level do we want to play at before a game? And then we can start more healthily talking about and allowing unbans, such as like Coalition Victory. I think every EDH player agrees that that's a really difficult win condition and can come off the ban list. Almost every single EDH player will agree on that. And then from there you can have things like on your list, Guy, like, we'll read them.
Yeah, I mean, I asked these questions, you know, to be fun and like, oh, what would we have done differently? Like, would we want to see Cyclonic Rift ban? Which it should not be. I was just like, oh, and then Blake, you know, you come in with the really intellectual, deep, thought-provoking response, and I was like, well, you know, I'd like to see Leovold unbanned. Worldfire and Sway of the Stars would be cool too. Yeah,
I just had to upclass you. Yeah. No.
Yeah, I told you this before, but you're like we are the meme of Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
You're the big Keanu Reeves with all his like, you know, powerful and mighty stance, and then I'm like the little one standing beside you, just like, hey, I think this. And it required little to no thought for me to say this. Because, like, I mean, like I said, Leovold is always a card that I want unbanned. I sit at my desk every day and stare at it for maybe, like...
You cry.
45 minutes.
Yeah.
Gifts Ungiven. Gifts Ungiven is one that I feel like could be taken off the ban list, but is also one that might end up staying, just because if I had the chance to get Gifts Ungiven, I'd probably use it consistently the same way every time. And that kind of violates the idea of repetitive gameplay. But if I didn't want to be degenerate and, you know, mean, then maybe I would have chosen to do something else.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind is that all gameplay is repetitive to some degree or another. It's just what degree do you arbitrarily choose.
You want to move into our conclusion, Blake?
Yeah, so this is something...
You and your thought-provoking...
This is something I kind of... Yeah, so you can let me know what you think. I haven't really ran it by you. But, like, let me know what you think of this, because do want to have like a dialogue with you, because it's like the way it seems is that the rules committee and the CAG only reflects the mindset of casuals, and by only supporting some playstyles and banning cards in other playstyles is very problematic. All because it like doesn't meet the subjective experience of fun in the eyes of the rules committee. And like I've said before, and I will repeat on my deathbed, fun is subjective. You can't tell me that playing stacks isn't fun. You can't tell me that playing chaos isn't fun. You can't tell me playing extra turns isn't fun. You just can't do that. And at this point, the rules committee isn't truly thinking about all EDH players and playstyles, and at this point is more of gatekeeping by keeping a lot of these cards on the ban list. So my call to action to like the average player is, please, when you sit down to a table to play EDH, please ask the question, hey, what power level do we all want to play at? You all talk for like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. You'll be like, oh, I want to play like my 5 or 6. And they'll be like, everyone will be like, yeah, I'm down for that. And then you'll play your game and there will be like no feel bads and everyone's happy. And pretty much you'll always have great games. You won't have anyone exploding in your face about being like, oh, you're playing such an unfair card. And then my call to action for the rules committee and the CAG is, please consider all playstyles to be valid. Fun is subjective. There's more than just playing casual, there's also competitive. Please unban some of these cards in those playstyles. You may not necessarily like them, but again, this is for all players. This is for the good of everyone. And don't ban cards that don't deserve the ban hammer, like Cyclonic Rift or Soul Ring, just because casuals don't have that conversation that I talked about and then complain to you. Please, we all agree that a smaller ban list is for the best.
I do think you bring up a lot of good points. And I mean, I think the ban list is just kind of meant to be like, you know, the kind of like the standard of like, here's what, like if you go to a game store and, you know, just everyone has kind of the idea of these are the cards that are, you know, a little too powerful. But if you were to then talk to your play groups beforehand and say, how hard do we want to go? Then maybe, you know, you could take some of those cards off. Some of them should probably stay on, but like, you know, you brought up the point that like Leovold in a competitive setting dies to all different kinds of removal. He's just not powerful enough to like hold its own, and until you get the lockdown, he's kind of
vulnerable.
He's kind of just he's just vulnerable and weak. So,
but the reason he's banned is because the rules committee doesn't view the way you can play him as fun, which can't be true. You can't really say that.
Right. It just contradicts kind of their own idea of like, you know, what fun is.
I also want to clarify to anyone listening, I'm not saying unban every single card. That's just not practical either. There are some cards that can't be banned, like Channel. The day Channel is unbanned, the format will probably die. That's just, I'm going to say that right here and now. But I think most of us can agree there's a lot of cards that can come off. Yes. Disclaimer.
I mean, you know, we've already kind of mentioned 4 or 5 that, you know, Coalition Victory, Sway of the Stars, Biorhythm, Worldfire, Leovold, could probably all come off the ban list. Sylvan Primordial, Primeval Titan probably could come off the ban list.
Yeah.
Just because they're part of 2-card combos that, you know, are pretty easy to deal with.
I'm sure all of you listening have your own thoughts. I hope that you've listened, and even if you disagree with us, you've been able to hear our rationale and hopefully persuade you in some things and maybe not convinced you in others. I don't know. But again, the major takeaway is just keep trying to have healthy dialogues. Don't let yourself succumb to your frustration and anger and make death threats or anything like that. Because this whole issue isn't going away. It comes up every major banning and unbanning. The trick is to just kind of improve upon the discussion that you had from last year and try to bring people up rather than tearing them down.
We are fortunate that we do focus on a format of Magic that probably has the least amount of bans and unbans that happen. Like, the last time that a ban happened was like a year and a half ago.
Yes.
So we are fortunate in that sense.
And I agree with the CAG and all the rules committee when they say if they start to ban and unban cards more frequently, that is very problematic. People will lose faith in the format and its stability, and no one will take it seriously, and people will start not playing. That's what happens in almost any card game. So I'm hoping that with the recent heat and the formation of the CAG, they're not gonna. Hopefully, they just don't ban and unban cards every other 3 months. That would not be good. I would like to see Paradox Engine unbanned one day, but if I have to wait, 1 or 2 years, that's fine. Just one day.
And like I said, that may happen just because, we're going to give it time to see whether or not it actually was a problematic card. I mean, we've taken cards off the unban list. We've taken cards off the ban list before. Doesn't mean that we can't do it again.
Yep, exactly.
Alright. You feel comfortable with ending?
Yeah, I feel good with that.
Alright. Thank you everyone for listening. Please reach out to us on thewizardstaff101@gmail.com. That's thewizardstaff with 2 S's. So thewizardstaff101@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you guys. We'd love to hear any suggestions that you have, any questions that you want to ask us. It can be about anything, literally anything. We want to hear from you guys. We want to make sure that we're not just getting bots listening to us all the time. So thank you very much and have a great night.
Peace.
Peace.